We begin with a CTV News exclusive. Several Ottawa passengers are recovering from a holiday travel nightmare. Their trip home delayed.
But they say their treatment while waiting in Cancun was terrible. Tonight, the airline WestJet is apologizing for what happened.
We get more from CTV's Michael O'Byrne. Mike.
It really is a horrible story. You know, sitting on a tarmac for 4.5 hours in a full plane, no air conditioning, 30-degree temperatures. Well, that's a travel nightmare all its own. But this story got a whole lot worse for about 150 Ottawa-bound WestJet passengers. It was an amazing 7-day getaway to Mexico for Betty Clark and her family over New Year's until it was time to fly home to Ottawa from Cancun.
Basically, I would call it a nightmare or a bad dream.
It was a bad dream that lasted 33.5 hours. She and her husband, their 2 young grandchildren, and her daughter and son-in-law left their Cancun hotel at 9 Saturday morning. They got home to Ottawa at 6:30 Sunday night.
We were 4.5 hours on the plane on Saturday afternoon.
Betty says in 4.5 hours, they were offered a single glass of water and a bag of pretzels. Then the flight was canceled for mechanical reasons. They were deplaned, and 3 hours later, all 150 passengers were put on buses, told they would be sent to a Courtyard Marriott for the night, then fly out in the morning. They ended up being dropped off in the parking lot of a hostel that passengers described as a rat hole.
Absolutely horrendous that a company like WestJet would leave all of their employees but their passengers in that situation with absolutely no help, and in a foreign country where the language was really a barrier for every one of us.
Stranded, one passenger managed to reach WestJet in Calgary. They said a mistake had been made and 2 more buses were on the way. The buses never showed, and an hour later, WestJet Calgary told them they were on their own for the night.
My 7-year-old grandson got very hysterical because he was petrified he was never going to get home again, and he was throwing up, and he was so scared.
Ottawa lawyer Chris Spiteri was also on the flight.
WestJet seemed to just abandon us.
He's considering launching a class action lawsuit on behalf of all the passengers.
It was quite frustrating, you know, seeing kids being sick, kids that were crying. We were basically dumped off in a parking lot off the main strip at a hotel, which was actually turned out to be a hostel. They didn't even know we were coming.
Chris, Mary, and their families managed to find a hotel on their own, out of pocket close to $600, but now home safe and sound. Late this afternoon, WestJet issued a statement of apology. It reads in part, "We understand that the delay and subsequent cancellation was both tedious and long, and that the service our guests were provided was clearly not up to the WestJet standards that we aspire to deliver. Unfortunately, due to an error by our booking partner, some hotel rooms were not available once guests arrived at the property, so some guests were forced to book accommodations elsewhere on their own." Now, Canada is expected to have a new air passenger Bill of Rights in place by this summer, but because WestJet says this was a mechanical delay, it likely wouldn't have helped in this case. However, for the way the passengers were treated, well, that's another matter altogether, and that just may end up in the courts.
A lot of travelers see these stories too, right? And it sends a chill. Like, it's a bit of a roll of the dice, and maybe it shouldn't be as much as that.
Especially when you're traveling with kids. Everything is magnified.
Imagine how frightening that would be.
All right.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks,
You're
Michael.
welcome.